Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy DELRAY Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. Sunday night, NBA playoffs. But we got something to talk about. Sticky Fingers, peace. Bruno 67, what's good? Christina Puente, thank you for showing up. Tyrell Robinson, what's good? CMW 662, what up, though? It's all good. Wait for a couple of other people to come up in here as we talk about it. They never told you this, though. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they never told you this. They told you everything with this. That's the funny part. John, Rael, salute. Celebrity News 1. How you doing? Who else is that? The Key Man, what's happening? Carla Shepherd, always blessed to have you. Yeah, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, what's good? Hopefully tomorrow's stock market is better than the last couple of weeks. Wait for a couple of other people to come up in here. Kareem. Who else? If I forget anybody, Sticky, King Blacks, what's good? Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate you guys coming through. I just wanted to run past you guys like I told you before. And this is even from Suge Knight. Like I said, Suge Knight had said this. I don't know what he knew. I know Reggie the Wright Jr. did not know anything in regards to what he was talking about in regards to Tupac's finances, ladies and gentlemen. So over the years, there has been much dialogue about the house not being in Tupac's name, the cars, and all of those things, right? And when asked by people who you would think would know, or who act like they know, should I say, we've been hearing for years that the reason why nothing was in Tupac's name was because of the fact that Tupac had bad credit, or Tupac had various lawsuits, if you will, right? Tupac did have legal trouble, as we know. He was out on appeal. We know that, I told you about Charles Ogletree, his lawyer, and all of those things. And Tupac wanting to settle a lot of those cases. But the funny part about it is you have people out here, and Reggie the Wright Jr. and Gullible John, who have been pushing this narrative that they knew what Tupac's finances were. And basically Reggie the Wright Jr. has been going around saying that Tupac had bad credit. He couldn't buy anything. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't do this and he couldn't do that. And the video I did earlier today is a proof in fact that the house in Woodland Hills, and you can see clearly that Tupac found out about the house not being in his name, because remember, even TMZ had reported that the house was actually being leased, or should I say rented first. Like I said, I put up the actual statement. The house was actually being leased or rented, if you will, right? Proof in fact to show you that Tupac had found out about that. And when Tupac found out about that, he was pissed. But this is the thing. Nobody, after running all of these lies all of these years and talking about how broke Tupac was, it's kind of like what they did to Michael Jackson. They was doing the Michael Jackson was broke thing, right? As long as he had collateral, he owned the Beatles catalog and all of those things, he could never be broke. You know what I mean? He might have had some debt. Don't know how much that really was, because I don't know, right? Just like Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and all of the other people who were claiming to know about Tupac's finances. So, as I told you before, Tupac had came to find out through Kevin Hackey. Kevin Hackey also said it, but Tupac had came to find out that the house that he was living in Woodland Hills was actually being leased under Suge Knight's wife's name, his ex-wife, by the name of Sharita Knight, right? And so, and Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Had been running the rumor, and like I said, this is a hell of a rumor to run, because it's like a justification for as to why they got over on Tupac, right? Tupac does bear some responsibility, but like I said, once again, if you're telling somebody something and they trust you and you're calling them your brother and all of these things, there's no reason why they shouldn't believe you. But long story short, he found out that the house was being leased in Suge Knight's wife's name, ex-wife's name. And so after that, shortly before Tupac's death, before Tupac had died, Tupac was buying the house. The house was actually in escrow. Did you hear what I just said? I said the house was in escrow, right? So that would say that, number one, evidently he came up with the money to buy the house. The house was going to be, it was in his name and it was in escrow. This is according to the Los Angeles Times, and all you have to do, is check those records to see exactly what that is. And that's what they reported on. Like I said, once again, also that it was being leased under Death Row's name. They said Death Row's name, but like I said, to let it be known. And so there's a lot of things that we're finding out now, some 30 odd years later, that there were a lot of mistruths and lies and misrepresentation of the facts, ladies and gentlemen, in regards to the late great Tupac Shakur. And like I said, once again, the people who have perpetrated these lies, and Gullible John, mainly, and Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. And like I said, when Reggie would talk about stuff like this, he would talk about it as a matter of fact. You know what I mean? Like he was in on the discussion. He went to City National Bank, and seen the bank accounts and who was getting what and so on and so forth. And that simply wasn't the case, ladies and gentlemen. The simple fact of the matter is Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knew nothing about Tupac's finances. As a matter of fact, Tupac's own mother really didn't know that much about his finances. So I know damn well the failed security for Death Row didn't know anything about his finances, right? So the very people, and this is kind of ironic, because the very people who were perpetrating these lies are now bankrupt. Bomb First as a channel, Gullible John Hyland, right? They're now bankrupt. Chapter 7. Financially insolvent, right? The cameras that they had, they were shooting with, I believe that when you file for bankruptcy, those cameras have to be sold to pay off the creditors. That's why we haven't seen Gullible John and Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. shooting videos. Now, as I say this, they might go and get some cameras, or somebody might lend them some cameras. But you can see the look on Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s face. I don't think that Gullible John is really dealing with him like that anymore. Once again, after basically crushing everything that Gullible John had built with Bombs First. So when you think about the big picture, the very people out here talking about Tupac's finances and how he was in debt, and how he, because of the cases that he had, and his credit was bad, And all of these things are the very people now who are bankrupt. And I don't say that in a um, braggadocious way. I say that as a lesson to be learned, right? And people, gullible John out here pushing these lies, and he himself is now financially insolvent. I can't even wrap my mind around that, right? You would talk about somebody in Tupac Shakur that he never met in life. Gullible John didn't know Tupac. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Tupac never really dealt with him, as confirmed by Suge Knight, uh, as confirmed by Napoleon, because they tried to get Napoleon to come on Bums First to try to talk about a non-existent relationship that Tupac and Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. supposedly had. And you got to understand, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and Gullible John, Reggie said, and y'all don't understand this, I need to explain this to you. Reggie said that he talked to Tupac twice on the day that Tupac was shot. And none of those things are true. None of them are true. So once again, I'm doing this to correct the record. Like I said, when people watch my videos, like I said, the video that I did earlier, I actually put up the article in which TMZ had reported on it. Like I said, once again, and saying through the LA Times that they looked up the records, and the house in Woodland Hills that was under Suge Knight's ex-wife name was in escrow when Tupac died. So it was true. Wasn't in his name. He found out, he was pissed. You know what I mean? Call for an audit, ready to leave the situation that he was under, masquerading as a death row artist and all of that. And like I said, from what they were saying, one was in escrow and trying to actually buy the house. And so, like I said, all of these rumors and things about Tupac's finances, man, it's sad, man, that people come out that really didn't know Tupac and just talk about, his money, and he was broke and he was in debt and all of these things. And the sad part about it is, in debt how? Right? He had lawsuits and things like that he wanted to settle. You seen the video I did about that. And when it came to try to get his money, Charles Ogletree, basically Tupac, saying, hey, look, man, Death Row got my money, call him and try to get a check, right? And in fact, Charles Ogletree saying, like, look, hey, I was being given the runaround. And this was Tupac's lawyer. He was being given the runaround by David Kenner. And they would never send the money, right? So Tupac wasn't broke from that perspective. Like I said, there were a bunch of games being played involving his finances and involving them doing what they needed to do to be able to, for him to be able to facilitate certain things so that he could settle some of the lawsuits that he had, albeit he brought it upon himself. So I just wanted to make this video, man, as a recap of the video from earlier to this morning that I dropped. And I said, like I said, I think it's very important that we understand what it is that's been going on with these lies. You have to understand that a lot of propaganda, a lot of people, and like I said, once again, I don't know if any of these guys knew. I don't know if Suge, I would think Suge probably would have known, because Tupac probably would have had that conversation with him. I don't know if people are knowing certain things and just not saying it because optically it wouldn't look good in their favor, or some people just might not know. But I know one thing for sure, that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. did not know what Tupac's financial situation was. He did not know whether Tupac was in debt or not. He did not know, and like I told you before, he didn't even know the lawyer who was representing Tupac in his appeal. But he would always say that, oh, if you wanted to keep Tupac, and he said it on one of these channels, he said, if you wanted to keep Tupac in check, you know what I mean? There was Tupac was out on appeal. If David Kenner wanted to be funny, Reggie the Rat Wright said David Kenner could have lost that appeal on purpose, right? Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. actually said that if you wanted to keep Tupac in check, all you had to do, because Tupac was out on appeal, all you had to do, David Kenner could get Tupac bail revoked or lose the appeal on purpose. Once again, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. did not know what he was talking about, because David Kenner was not the lawyer for Tupac's appeal. It was Charles Ogletree. You can look that up. It's a fact. So with the information so readily available to you, to me, to the public, right? I know everybody didn't have the time to really look up certain things, but you know, if you're a Tupac fan and you really wanted to know what was going on in his life at, up until the time of his death, and all of these things that are being said by people who who act as if they know, right? Something as simple as that. And once again, like I said, the the I don't know what you call that when somebody does that. The ass kissing, I guess. You know what I mean? Like kissing up to David Kenner. Also the lie, like I told you before, the lie that he told about the snatching of the chain. He said, "Well, I'm telling that lie because I want Frank to tell that lie because I don't want Tupac to get violated." Right? So I was doing David Kenner a favor. Once again, the kissing up again, right? Wasn't doing Tupac a favor. Tupac was in a coma. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, didn't Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. call his father within a certain amount of time and tell his father? And from the video you seen the other day, I showed you that Tupac was dead. And his father said, "Well, at least Reggie thought he was dead at that particular time, right?" So if he thought he was dead, then why would he say that he would need Frank to lie about some chain being snatched at the MGM Grand and tell that lie in order to take up for Tupac so that he wouldn't get violated? You see how the lie doesn't add up? Like what? Hold on. Tupac's in a coma, right? He's saying that Frank lie about this, and the reason why I said the lie was because I didn't want him to be violated. It just didn't add up. And so, like I said, once again, I had to make this video as a recap. You know what I mean? To let you guys know, man, about any information that I come across, or that'll debunk any of these lies that have been told. Like I said, you see now, Bums First, they're not really putting out uh, any more propaganda or garbage as of late. You know what I mean? They've been trying to invite other people on their platform to try to galvanize people to come over there. But like I said, it's simply not working. You got to think about what they built their audience on. They built their whole audience on lies, simple lies. You know what I mean? Jamie Foxx was poisoned by P. Diddy. Maya Suge Knight gave Maya some kind of venereal disease, and then they would tell these stories and then end up apologizing a day or two later after they've eaten off the lies. Then they would do that, right? They try to extort Snoop. They got a tape about something about some other kind of stuff. Like, it's just this is all Gullible John did, was piggyback off of the backs of the hip hop community, right? Of our culture, right? And Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., somebody who does not have not one iota of talent, right? Who failed Tupac, who failed Suge Knight, basically assisted Gullible John in tearing people down. There was nothing that they did that was anywhere near positive or uplifting or any kind of information. As a matter of fact, what they tried to do was make it seems as if, and because Reggie, it basically says he's still working for law enforcement. He's still doing some work for law enforcement. He said that on the Seaside video and talking about KPD, right? And so, in him doing that, he always made people believe that he knew something that everybody else didn't know, right? And so that was always his thing. I'm telling you guys, X, Y, and Z. And like I said, a lot of times with the Keefe D situation, well, we understand that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was basically trying to set Keefe D up, right? Trying to claim responsibility for Keefe D talking, and now as the reason why Keefe D is sitting in Clark County Detention Center. Because Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said, because I'm the one that got him to talk. I'm the one that got him to go on, Vlad and all the dialogue and all these other places to talk. So he wants to be the one who tries to take credit, right, for the solving or the helping to facilitate the solving of the murder of Tupac Shakur, when that's simply not true, right? Greg Kading, along with the United States Attorney, for whatever reason, they had information in regards to Keefe D doing other crimes and got caught up, and he confessed. So, you like I said, once again, these are the things that are happening that we don't know nothing about behind the scenes. And then people come on YouTube. They were coming on YouTube like, you know, like they had predictions. There was no prediction. If you working with the people, right, then there's really no prediction to be had. You're basically working with the law enforcement for whatever reason you're working for them. I don't know if they cut them a check or whatever. You know what I mean? And then coming on here saying, hey, you know what? I'm telling you, in the next 2 weeks, they knocking on doors. They knocking on doors. Okay, they're knocking on doors because you talking to them and you calling KPD house trying to get him on the phone and recording his conversations and trying to get him to say something. Like I said, they didn't need Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s help. KPD basically said enough on his own, as we see what they're going to use in court, right? As a matter of fact, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. went down to the grand jury and lied on numerous occasions, But like I said, you guarantee that they won't charge him with any kind of perjury or anything like that. Like I said, he's viewed as an asset. And like I said, when he plays both sides of the fence, he does it so well and so eloquently that, he changes up his demeanor. 1 minute, he's sitting with the Seaside Police, with the thing when they honoring his father, giving his father a reward, now he's back on the law enforcement side. Then he come on bomb first. And now, he's pretending to be, part of the homies and all of that. It's just weird. Like I said, I don't know where they do that at. But like I said, once again, for all of the people who didn't know, that, because like I said, when in general conversations, people run that back. They run stuff back that they hear. Well, because I get it all the time in my DMs. Did you hear about such and such saying this, saying that? You know what I mean? And I'm like, what? What you mean? And it's like they don't have a point of reference in order to be able to discern whether it's a lie or whether it's the truth, right? And so that's what I hope to do when I come on here and I talk with you guys and we chit chat and things like that. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, he said, I'm gonna do to the half of it, brother. Yeah, like I said, so when we talk about that, the thing about Tupac, why would a person run that rumor and they didn't really know? You know what I mean? Why would a person come out and be like, yeah, the reason why the cars and all of the cars and all of this wasn't in Tupac's name was because Tupac credit was bad, because Tupac was broke, and Tupac and this, that, and the other. And as a matter of fact, it was a lie. It was a lie. It was a simple lie. Like I said, the money that Tupac was getting from Sugar, if he was getting, let's say, if you're getting $20,000 a month, right? And you went to apply for your interest rate might be a little bit higher for whatever you want, but it wouldn't be that you couldn't afford it, right? They might ask for a little bit more money for the down payment, right? But it wouldn't be because you couldn't afford it. You understand what I'm saying? The same thing with Tupac's bail, right? When Tupac got on a bail, he put up his own publishing, right? His publishing revenue and his publishing and his record company to basically put up as collateral so that he can get out on bail. Suge did not pay his bail. That's what they use as collateral so that they could get their money back. So Tupac was never broke when you talk about that, right? And you could go to any banking institution and at any time they will definitely take his intellectual property, song rights, and all of those things and the royalties and say, hey, you want a loan or you want this, and they'll give it to you. So once again, like I said, when you know how the business works, there could be nothing further from the truth of Tupac having bad credit and all of these things. So like I said, I had to come in and like I said, do a follow-up to the video that I released this morning. Yeah, King Rod, you absolutely right. I mean, not only is like playing both sides of the fence, like, but there's just so many things that I've seen and that I've heard and that I know about, right? Some things I won't say because, like I said, it doesn't really matter either here or there, right? And I wouldn't want to reduce myself to the level that like some of these guys have done, like, on this internet thing. It's crazy. So, like I said, once again, but the playing both sides of the fence, I told y'all, man, with the thing that hit me the hardest was when 3 days after Tupac died, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was talking to LAPD, telling them that, hey, man, Suge has blood gang members on the payroll and masquerading or moonlighting as a security, and they got guns. The LAPD, they actually put that statement out. That's actually in a police report. And I made a video about it. And I was like, oh, wow. Here's a guy, like, you mean, take this into consideration. Here's a guy in Suge Knight who put Reggie ahead of his security, the security for the artists under death row, right? And not being there in Vegas, not having adequate security for Tupac, Frank Alexander not having any kind of a communication apparatus that night, having to use the payphone. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. telling them not to carry their guns. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Basically pulling Michael Moore and the security off of Tupac and only leaving Frank on him. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. then lying about the fact that he said that it wasn't until they got to the MGM Grand that he knew that Frank Alexander was the only security guard on Tupac. But then he lied about and said, well, Tupac called him. He talked to Tupac twice that night. Well, we all know if he talked to Tupac twice, then he would have known that Frank was the only person on Tupac. But he didn't talk to Tupac twice that night, ladies and gentlemen, on the night that Tupac was shot. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. lied about that. He lied about that. And he lied about that so that the people on the internet would think that he was more endearing to Tupac, right, than he actually was. It is a fact. It is a fact beyond any shadow of a doubt that Tupac told Frank Alexander to call Reggie, and Tupac and Frank had to go to a payphone. He told the whole story. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. then would hijack the story and come back now that Frank is deceased and come back around and act as if Tupac actually called him on the phone from the MGM Grand the night that him and Frank caught the cab over to the MGM Grand. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. would have you believe that Tupac called him while he was at the MGM Grand, while they were waiting for Suge to get to the fight. And it's a well-known fact. Tupac did not have a kind of phone or a communication apparatus in where Tupac could do that. Ladies and gentlemen, you can go look at the videos of Tupac and Frank walking through the MGM Grand. Tupac didn't have no phone, y'all. Once again, did you hear what I just said? And see, this is something that you can corroborate yourself. You don't even need me to tell you. Like I said, when he said those things, and he told that to the grand jury, ladies and gentlemen, he told that to that is in the grand jury transcript. The grand jury transcript that is in the grand jury transcript that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. told the grand jury that Tupac called him wondering where Suge was at, and that he talked to Tupac, and he didn't. He didn't. And the question needs to be asked: Well, what did Tupac call you on? Because he didn't have a phone. He damn sure Tupac Shakur did not have Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s number in his head enough to go call him on any type or on a payphone or anything like that. And that is a 100% fact that he said that. Why would he lie about that? Why would he lie about talking to Tupac? Basically right before the Tyson fight, but right before the incident happened. Why would he lie and say, yo, Tupac called me and asked me where Suge was at? Because he didn't like to get to the fight, because Suge always got to the fight late, right? Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. stole that story from Frank. And then he switched it off, right? Because Frank told the story. Frank said Tupac, when he got to the MGM Grand, Tupac had told him he was frustrated. Like, damn, Suge, he late again. You know what I mean? I get tired of this shit. All of that. Frank gave word for word quotes that Tupac, and you could hear that it would be him and him sounding like that, right? Frank gave quotes about that, talked about the whole thing, right? And that Tupac told him, yo, go call Reggie and find out where Suge was at. This is what Tupac told Frank Alexander to do. But Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. went into the grand jury and lied, hijacked Frank's story, right? And said that Tupac actually called him up. And it wasn't Frank, it was Tupac. And he lied about that because once again, he had already told the story, right? About he didn't know until that Suge got to the fight that night, to the actual fight ready to go in, that Frank Alexander was the only security on Tupac. So if he found that out at that particular time, then who told him? You see what I'm saying? So you got two lies going on at the same time. Well, who told Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. That Frank Alexander was the only security on Tupac? Because that's when he said that he found out. Who told him that? Who told him that? Right? Who could tell him that? Like I said, once again, it wasn't Tupac. It damn sure wasn't Tupac. Was it Frank that told him? Was it Suge that told him? You see, so when we understand what has been going on for all of these years, now you see Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has tucked into a corner. But I'm telling you, that's one of the key lies that is going to come out and be discovered in the grand jury. When Keefe D goes, if Keefe D decides, to take it all the way to trial and don't take a plea or anything like that, that is one of the key lies that is going to be exposed in regards to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Right? And I know what he's going to say. Well, I don't know if it was Tupac or Frank, but one of them called me. No. You can't go back on that. Because you know that he knows that he said Tupac called him. It's in the transcript. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that just goes to show you that there is nothing that these people won't lie about in order to try to be relevant in this YouTube thing. And it's like the truth is good enough. It's good enough. I don't know. I didn't know. I wasn't there. You know what I mean? Somebody told me, yeah, like I said, and letting you know where the information actually comes from, it's okay. But not to them. No, Tupac called me. And like I said, my thing is this. That's the second time that he said that Tupac called him. So my thing was, when was the first time? Because remember, Tupac was over at the MGM Grand earlier that evening, in which Michael Moore was with him earlier that evening, and Tupac Tupac didn't say anything that time, because that was when Tupac got lost and walked back over to the Luxor, right? But Frank said he wanted to call Reggie and let Reggie know to tell Suge where Tupac was, because he wanted to let him know, because he always wanted to know where Tupac was, mostly at all times, right? Right. And so with that being said, that's early in the evening. So if Frank called him and left a message, then Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. would have known that Frank was on him earlier in that evening when Frank called him up and left a message. Where did he leave a message from? On the payphone. Now, and you got to understand this. The cold part about this is, don't you think that it would be actually embarrassing for Frank to actually say, yo, I was using the payphone? Think about it for a minute. Think about it. You security for the biggest rap artist in the world at that particular time. But Frank was honest. He was like, man, you know what? I felt fucked up because I was using the payphone. I didn't have no walkie-talkie. I didn't have no nothing, no phone, no nothing, none of that. So what we're gonna have to find out is, because that's a hell of a lie. That's a hell of a lie. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. saying that he talked to Tupac twice on the phone, twice, before he was shot. Yeah, this is a fact. And like I said, for the people that haven't really been following along, you really need to, really pay attention to what's going on, because like I said, it's a lot of things being said that are simply not true. And people are simply trying to act like they're more involved or more knowledgeable about the situation than they actually are. You know what I mean? Like I told you, the other thing that came out was Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. had said for all of these years. That guess what? You know, the Nextel radios that Michael Moore said he heard Gotcha on, they didn't have a walkie-talkie feature. He said that for the last 27 some odd years, ladies and gentlemen. I did a video pointing out the fact that he had said that to Gullible John because Gullible John had asked him. Ladies and gentlemen, when Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. went and testified in front of the grand jury, he finally admitted. He finally admitted, once again trying to blame Frank. Well, Frank didn't call me that night. He didn't call me and let me know there was a fight. What? And see, listen, I want you to listen to this. This is where this shit is so disingenuous that it's not even funny. He goes in front of the grand jury and says, you know, he cops to the truth about the lie that he'd been lying for the last 27 years, basically saying that the Nextel phones didn't have a walkie-talkie apparatus. He confessed to that in front of the grand jury. But while confessing to that, he said, well, you know, Frank Alexander didn't call me that night to let me know that there was a fight. There was some kind of fight, right? Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. already knew that Frank didn't have a phone. How did he know that Frank didn't have a phone, ladies and gentlemen? Because Frank called him earlier that evening for Tupac when Tupac asked him to try to find out where Suge was at, to bring the tickets to get into the fight. And Tupac was mad. So Reggie already knew that, but he went into the grand jury basically and passed the buck off on Frank once again. Frank didn't call me. Well, did you know, the simple question would be, well, did you know that Frank didn't have a radio? Did Frank ever try to call you earlier that evening? Right? Because Frank said that Tupac told him to call you. Did he try to call you that evening? And then you're gonna hear a bunch of Scooby-Doo, right or wrong. He might have, you know. So, like I said, you get into the Tupac debt. He and Tupac was in debt. That's why he couldn't have nothing in his name. Like I said, once again, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knew nothing about Tupac's finances. Absolutely nothing. And like I said, as a matter of fact, y'all, to be perfectly clear, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. didn't even know Tupac wasn't signed to death row. And he been running around here talking about he used to run death row. So how the person that used to run death row didn't know that Tupac wasn't actually legally signed to death row? That ought to show you right there that he really didn't know anything. It was above his pay grade. Interscope, Jimmy Iovine, them wasn't running nothing past Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. But like I said, he's made those videos over the years. Oh, Tupac was broke. Yeah, you know, that's the reason why he was getting this and he was getting that. And Suge was giving him this and Suge was giving him that. But once again, he didn't tell you because he didn't know that the house, once Tupac found out the house wasn't in his name and it was in Suge's ex-wife's name, that Tupac planned to buy the house. And right before Tupac died, the house was actually in escrow and Tupac was buying that house out in Woodland Hills. Facts. But they're not going to tell you that because they want you to believe the indigent story about Tupac and how X, Y, and Z. When they say Tupac died, he had what, 100,000 in his bank account? Something like that, right? Yeah, you can. I mean, like I said, that house at back then was worth what, 900,000? From that perspective, from 900,000. Come on, man. He could afford the house. Like I said, once again, and he was buying the house. So, like I said, once again, I appreciate you guys, man, for listening. It's crazy, man. Yeah, absolutely. A Philly rapture. It's absolutely perjury. It's absolutely perjury, man. Like I said, I don't know the reason why he had to go to the grand jury and lie that Tupac called him. You know, once again, I understand why he would do it. I understand why he would do it. Once again, to make himself seem more important to the situation than he actually was. But the fact of the matter is, when they asked him why didn't he go to the MGM, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said his radio was blowing up and they was, you know, calling him, trying to get him down to Club 662. Well, once again, his radio was blowing up. Well, he should have made sure. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, y'all. You make the guy that's on the number one artist on the label doesn't have a radio to summon security to let you know if anything's going on or wrong. Frank said, "Yo, we in the MGM, we panicking. People coming up asking for autographs. You can see Tupac get flooded and frustrated and all of that, right? There you have it, man. Like I said, there was a lot of jealousy, man, a lot of envy going on. And like I said, and so one to tell those lies after Tupac's death, one to basically go into the police and tell them that, hey, you know what, Suge got blood gang members doing security for him and they carrying guns 3 days after Tupac died is the most outrageous shit that I've ever heard in my life about somebody who swears up and down in videos that I was always Suge's right hand man. Y'all see that video? I put that one out too when he said, you know, I was always Suge's right hand man. Well, if your right hand man do that to you, then you don't need a left hand man. You don't need no hands. You know, it's just as plain and simple as that. See, that's another question that they never ask him. Yo, why did you go to the LAPD 3 days after Tupac died and tell them that Suge had blood gang members on the payroll, right? And that they were carrying guns? Why did you do that? And Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. gonna say, I was trying to save him. No, he wasn't. He was trying to get him out the way. Because he thought at that particular time, he knew Suge was on probation, and if they would catch Suge probably hanging out with gang members or being affiliated or associated with gang members, he knew Suge would get violated, man. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. And so when he says that, oh, I was asking Frank to lie about the Orlando chain snatching thing, you know, that was the thing that started the fight. I was lying about that so that Tupac wouldn't get violated. And then once it came out, then he was like, man, I don't give a fuck if he don't have to. I don't have to be security for him. I didn't need that little $300 extra a day that I was getting for bodyguarding Tupac. You know what I mean? He said, I hope that he do get caught with guns, and so his ass will get violated, and they send him back to prison. He said that in an actual video that I put out, ladies and gentlemen. But yet, once again, in public, he would say what? Oh, I did that, you know, so Tupac wouldn't get violated. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. is a scoundrel, man. You know what I mean? And like I said, the thing he did to Suge Knight proved everything I needed to know. I was like, oh, wow. So now you don't see the propaganda and the lies anymore, right? Because Suge came out, exposed it. I've been telling y'all from day one, he had not anybody here, or could have been some people here, I don't know. He had people calling me names, you know, talking about, hey, yeah, this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? He had them going back to the elementary schoolyard name calling thing, right? The little shiny object, you know, focus on this little shiny object over here. He don't listen to what he's saying. Don't listen to what he's saying. Don't y'all over there watching him. He calling his subscribers stupid. Y'all stupid. Y'all work at Walmart. Y'all ain't nothing but a bunch of Walmart workers. That's what Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said. Like it was like something was wrong with working at Walmart. Walmart got benefits. Walmart's one of the biggest employers in the world, but as well as in the United States. But he was making fun of his own subscribers, saying that they were stupid for listening to what I was saying and what Choke No Joke was saying, right? That his subscribers were stupid for listening to what we were saying, and that they were stupid and nothing but Walmart workers. This is what they were conveying to the public. I'm like, wow, man, they must got some loyal subscribers over there. They call them stupid and dumb, you know, and all of these other things. So, like I said, this is what we're dealing with, you know. So, like I said, when you hear anything about Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. talking about Tupac, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Tupac was on death for 11 months. You would have thought Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was his accountant, and Tupac was asking for an audit. So, you know, go figure. You know what I mean? Go figure. So if Tupac was asking for an audit, he evidently knew what was up, and he was like, "Hey, look, I just want to know what I'm paying for, right? What I'm being charged for, right? Because you got to remember, Tupac was being charged for Nate Dogg's child support. He was being charged for Miss Chalette's Range Rover. All of these things were basically um, charged to Tupac's account after he died, and it came up in the court case. I'm gonna bring y'all back on that video. I did a video about that. I'm gonna definitely show y'all how that worked. And it was like, oh wow, you know. So like I said, once again, this is what it is. This is what it is. Dow Jones says, I swear, Reggie's method of lying and sensationalism gives off the impression that he's not competent enough to do all of this alone. Absolutely. Like I said, once again, he had his right hand man, Gullible John, man. Like I said, sometimes it looked like the information was coming from somewhere else, if you will. But like I said, it is what it is, man. Karma's undefeated, man. Absolutely, Carla Shepard said it. Carla Shepard said it more eloquently than anyone. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. didn't give a damn about Tupac, man. He didn't give a damn about Tupac. He did a video the other day asking Whack 100 why Whack 100 was a Tupac hater, right? See, that's another one of those shiny object things he does, right? One minute he talking bad about Whack 100, and then the next minute he wants to, it's crazy, man. I don't understand it. I'm like, wow, and so once again, when we deal with the facts of the matter, this is the same thing he tried to do to me. Like I told y'all, for the people who know, he sued me, for defamation and copyright infringement. I was like, what? What is that? Like I said, it was a quick money grab. He thought that I wasn't going to show up. He thought that I wasn't going to respond to the case. He thought that, you know what I mean, that all of the errors that he made in filing his case, was crazy. So it was like, oh, wow, But like I said, once again, God is good, and good shall prevail over evil. Not immediately, but in the long run. Yeah, not immediately, but in the long run. So, yeah, karma will. Yeah, yes, it will. A Windex file. Yes, indeed. So, like I said, I just wanted to let you guys know, man, that Reggie knew nothing about Tupac's credit, nothing about his business, and nothing about any of that, man. So when you hear anything from him from that perspective, just remember that. And like you see the floundering over there at Bums First now. No more videos, no more none of that stuff, that propaganda that Reggie has been spewing, none of the lies, none of the misinformation, none of the misstatements, none of the slander, the defamation. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's grasping for straws now, because that line, that practice of that line of information and disinformation and all of those things, it's ran its course. It's ran its course. So like I said, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys. Your boy DELRAY, straight gang.